Okay, it looks like we're about set. So let me just get things kicked off here. So welcome everyone to our webinar today, sponsored by BeamUp. We're going to hear all about how to leverage AI and reduce that shrink and boost your P&L. My name is Stephanie Hoover, and I'll be sort of in the background hosting today, but just a little bit of housekeeping. If you have questions during the webinar, you can submit your questions through the Q&A button, and we will get to those at the end. We've set aside a little bit of time to answer some questions for everyone at the end. So with that, I'd like to introduce our speaker today. That is Stefan Levy. He is the CEO and founder at BeamUp, and I'm super excited to hear all about your company, Stefan, and AI.
Thanks for the intro, Stephanie, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. As Stephanie said, my name is Stefan Levy. I'm CEO and founder of BeamUp, an AI facilities intelligence startup. BeamUp uses advanced data science and AI to revolutionize operations, asset protection, and physical security for the world's largest organizations. Today, the focus of this webinar is how AI could help analyze data and generate insights to reduce, shrink, and boost your business's P&L. We're going to be dividing this webinar into 5 different sections. First, what are the main challenges as it relates to data and shrink? Second, what are the limits of traditional BI and rule-based approaches as it relates to data analysis? Third, we'll then look at what is AI, how does it work, and how could it help us transcend the constraints of these traditional approaches. We'll then move into some concrete and specific examples and use cases of how this technology can help you improve your business's bottom line. Finally, we'll leave some time at the end for any questions and answers. So let's dive in. So as I said, part 1 is what are the challenges as it relates to data analysis around shrink? We all know, everyone on this call, that shrink is an absolutely monumental challenge. According to the Wall Street Journal, $142 billion a year are lost of shrink. Sorry for jumping around on the slides a bit. Just in this 1 hour of this webinar alone, retailers are going to lose $16 million. So it's absolutely a huge, significant problem. And when we try and analyze the complexity of the problem, we see that it's really multifaceted with numerous attack vectors, including insider threat, organized retail crime, opportunistic theft, fraudulent returns, supply chain issues, and process issues. And each one of these vectors has multiple permutations and associated risks with them. And this complexity is compounded by the fact that retailers have dozens, hundreds, or even thousands of different locations. And across this expansive ecosystem of shrink, there's a tremendous amount of relevant data generated by a multitude of different types of systems, ranging from your inventory management system to warehouse management systems to POS systems to self-checkout systems, RFID, video cameras, alarms, workforce, external factors such as local crime levels, and myriad other sources. For everyone on this webinar charged with the responsibility of protecting your business's assets, you have a challenging, complex, and critical function in your organization. I would argue that physical asset protection is even more complex than cyber and the protection of digital assets. There is a more complex environment with more threat vectors, more variety of data, and more unstructured data. And this significant challenge is made even more challenging by software and technological approaches that lag years behind the cyberspace. The use of AI is limited in asset protection, and when it is used, it is generally limited to video analytics, leaving all those other data sources largely untapped. But you might ask the question, why do I even need a change? Why do I need the application of new technology? So let's explore 3 characteristics and limitations of what I will refer to as the status quo approaches. After outlining these, we'll discuss how AI can help address them. So now we're going to delve into the limitations of current frameworks. And I think before going into the specifics of BI solutions and rules-based frameworks, I think it's important to talk about data silos. Solving problems requires data. Ideally, you want a holistic view of all the data related to shrink in your organization. But in reality, you likely don't. You're all operating to varying degrees within the constraints of data silos. And if you do not have all the relevant data connected, by definition, you cannot uncover all trends, relationships, and correlations driving shrink. By definition, you are making decisions based on a partial view. In a general sense, beyond the world of asset protection, companies can lose over 20% of their revenue annually due to inefficiencies caused by data silos. Employees spend hours each week searching for information they need, and this lost time could reduce overall work efficiency by up to 30%. We have data silos since data in the real world is messy. Data is heterogeneous, it's unstructured, it's inconsistent. As a result, breaking silos and merging multiple data sets into a single data set requires a lot of work. It requires ongoing transformation and cleaning. And those processes require time, money, and resources that likely you and your organization do not have. You might ask, how could AI help with this? We'll explore this later on. But I'd like to move on to how, given this constraint of silos, the data is actually analyzed and how insights are generally driven today in the world of asset protection. When we look at BI solutions and the impact and the limitations, they're not as widely recognized or discussed as what we just discussed, which is the impact of data silos. In a general sense, BI solutions are constrained by the limited data fed into them, the underlying silos that exist within your organization that we just discussed. But this limitation is compounded by their own internal constraints. First, BI solutions only work well with structured data. That leaves vast amounts of data from your organization that is extremely valuable untapped. Think about images, video, unstructured text, the floor plans and layouts of your facilities and of your inventory. You start with a silo in your organization, but then you have to silo off all other data that these solutions simply cannot use. Second, the analysis and insight generation aspect with BI frameworks is still largely manual. And with any manual process, there are scalability issues. Add more data, more volume, more scope, and you need more analysts, for which you simply likely don't have the budget. And with the added scale, the higher chance that something changes in your BI process, in your data, a prefix is changed, a date format is changed, and now your BI queries are broken. And the insights that could be generated have a limit. As humans, we simply cannot understand complex correlations across millions of data points. BI analysis, therefore, does not lend itself well to a real-time proactive approach, but rather is generally focused on past events within a specific silo. It does not easily extend into the realm of complex insight generation, complex scenario modeling, or future predictions. That is not to say that BI solutions and BI analysts cannot provide great value. They can. To the contrary, I would argue that BI teams are the foundation of any AI initiatives. Rather, I'm highlighting the inherent limitations of this approach. Some organizations might say, well, we don't only look in the past and we don't only have a hindsight BI-related view, and we have what we could call a rule-based system to help us actively optimize decision-making in the present. An example of a rule-based system, I want an alert to flag any voided transaction at a POS terminal where the transaction amount exceeds $500. But again, we have two significant limitations. Rules work well for very simple problems. Rule-based systems struggle, though, with complex, dynamic, and ambiguous scenarios where it's hard to codify all possible scenarios and permutations. And shrink, as we all know, is a complex and dynamic problem. You could write simple rules. I want that alert for any voided transaction above $500, and you'll generate the obvious. Maybe you'll generate some value with low-hanging fruit, but you might also generate a lot of noise. But if you really want to have significant impact, you will struggle in vain to describe every condition, every relationship, sub-relationship, and variable, covering all of your business processes touching shrink, which are incredibly complex, and which might vary store by store, business unit by business unit, geography by geography, and multiple other factors. you'll end up with a spaghetti-like process as seen on the left-hand side of the slide with your complexity of a rule-based system. And importantly, you could only write rules to look for what you already know that you should look for. In other words, a known known. By definition, you cannot describe all the behaviors, patterns, and correlations that you are simply unaware of, the known unknowns, which are such a significant and substantial part of the world of Shrink. Second, like BI approaches, a rule-based approach is simply not scalable. Rules do not learn from your data, they do not evolve, and they stay largely static without human intervention. But the world is dynamic, your business changes, your risks change, your environment changes, the threats change because they could learn and adapt. Your simple rule that you want all transactions that are voided above $500 to be flagged, at some point, someone's going to figure it out. And that rule will no longer hold any value. Now your insider threat will be only voiding transactions under $499. So the ability for rules to adequately address a complex problem such as Shrink also doesn't work because of the sheer challenge of the management overhead of constantly updating this spaghetti world of rules. More than 50 to 100 rules cannot be efficiently and effectively managed over time. Before moving on to the next section of this webinar, let's take a pause for a poll. Stephanie, if you're able to pull up the poll.
I'm seeing it. I don't know if anyone else is seeing it. So
okay, maybe I'm just not seeing it, so I'll read through it and assume that everyone can see it. In your current role, what are your biggest challenges with handling data? Time-consuming reporting, data quality and accuracy issues, difficulties in integrating diverse data sources for complete visibility, or lack of actionable insights?
Okay, so people are answering the poll right now. Give it a second. And can everyone see the results as they're coming in? Hope so.
I can't see the results, Stephanie.
Okay. Let's do this. Okay, so let me end poll and see if I can then share it. There we go. Okay, can people see now, I think?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so I think there's nothing so surprising in here. The number one challenge cited is the difficulty in integrating diverse sources of data for complete visibility, which are the data silos that we discussed earlier in the presentation. And I guess close second and third, time-consuming reporting, data quality, and accuracy issues. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to discuss in a few slides in this presentation how AI could help address these issues that the audience has highlighted. So I'd now like to move on to the third part of the presentation, which is what is AI and how could it address these limitations of the data silos that we just discussed, for example. But before diving in, I'd like to take a minute just to explain on a personal level why I entered this space. As we've discussed, the physical world is equally or arguably more important than the digital space, and it's arguably more complex. But we've seen how in technology terms it is a neglected space. Just as a comparison with cyber, there are 1,700 cyber software companies. $10 billion a year on average is invested in cyber startups with incredible talent in big data and AI. The average enterprise uses 32 different cyber software solutions. Compare that to the world of asset protection. This neglect, this lack of innovation, makes your already difficult job exponentially more difficult. I founded BeamUp to address this issue. Our vision is applying the modern tech stack of cybersecurity and of AI and data science to the world of physical assets and infrastructure to empower teams like yours to deliver better results for their businesses and their shareholders. Now I'd like to discuss what is AI. The most common definition is a technology that enables machines to perform tasks that typically require human intelligence. I don't think that this is entirely accurate, and we'll come back to this definition in a bit. These tasks may include understanding and generating speech, classifying elements with images, uncovering patterns in data, making predictions, and even engaging in autonomous decision-making. AI is the overarching field, and within it, there are a variety of different approaches and technologies. All the innovation we hear about these days, like ChatGPT, is coming in the deep learning space. This is also the space where my startup BeamUp plays. And in the next slide, I'll give a high-level overview of how it works. A, to demystify the field, and B, to show the tremendous capabilities that could be applied to the asset prevention industry. ChatGPT is a really famous example of an unsupervised deep learning model. How does it work? In concept, it's relatively simple. The AI model is fed tens of millions of examples of text from books, movies, scripts, articles, and other sources. It is important to note that the text was never labeled. No one needed to identify any word, define them, or highlight the relationships between them. Rather, from the tens of millions of examples, the model started to learn the relationship between words and the structure of language on its own. For example, it will learn the word pet, walk, and bark statistically often appear together alongside the word dog. This is not dissimilar from how a child learns. No one is sitting and defining words for a child. Through exposure and repetition, they begin to understand the relationship of words and infer their meaning based on context. This process is incremental. This process depends on feedback, with a parent or teacher making corrections. In the same way, AI models have a layer of human validation, like when you say a response was not satisfactory, so that they can continuously improve. Now, I might have made ChatGPT sound very simple because the high-level concept is simple, but the underlying technology is absolutely complex and indeed a technological breakthrough. Deep learning, of which ChatGPT is just one example, is the most scalable of AI techniques, as it would be impractical to have humans label and define enormous data sets for training of models. Here, with the deep learning approach, they could be fed the raw data. We said in our definition in the last slide that AI is the field of technology that allows machines to execute tasks normally performed by humans. I will be a bit politically incorrect, and I'll suggest that the reality is that AI could perform certain tasks that we would struggle to efficiently complete or cannot even complete at all as humans. We cannot process data at speed and tremendous scale, cannot uncover patterns, repetitively perform the same tasks with consistency and without fatigue, or predict future outcomes as good as an AI model. So we will see in the next slides how AI could address the limitations of the current approaches and status quo frameworks. In specific, how this technology could help break down data silos, process huge volumes of data at scale, and solve extremely complex problems and generate insights around shrink. On the other hand, it is crucial to note that while AI excels in these areas, human intelligence remains unparalleled in domains such as creativity, emotional understanding, moral reasoning, and judgment. In my opinion, ignoring AI and its capabilities is a mistake, but only relying on AI is equally misguided. AI is not a replacement for us, but a complementary technology that could step up our capabilities by empowering us to focus on more complex and creative endeavors. Let's come back to the question we asked earlier in the presentation, in which many of you highlighted is your key challenge around data in the organization, which is data silos. How could AI help with data silos? In two different ways. AI technologies can automate the process of mapping, transforming, cleaning, and structuring data, making that process something that would otherwise be time and resource prohibitive with manual process suddenly achievable. Furthermore, unlike BI queries or rules, note that the data being fed to an AI model does not always need to be consistent or perfectly structured. And it's a reality of the world, as we've mentioned before, that data isn't perfect, since it could be understood within context. Think in the same way you could have many typos and errors and really mangle a question that you ask ChatGPT, and it will still generally understand what you meant because it understands based on context and not based on rules. Once you deploy AI in your organization, you're in a position to begin knocking down silos and leveraging data that exists but was previously inaccessible to you and your team. And now you're in a position to have a holistic oversight of your space, probably for the first time. AI excels in processing large volumes of semi-structured and unstructured data in real time. This capability enables dynamic decision-making and proactive asset protection postures. So compared to BI frameworks, now you could process more data in terms of scope, your structured data, but all your images, floor plans, unstructured text, and so on. Process more volume of data, process it faster, and generate more powerful insights without additional resources. And we'll see some real-life concrete examples of this in the coming slides. And when we compare AI to rule-based approaches, we quickly see that unsupervised learning algorithms are adept at discovering hidden structures and patterns within millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of data points in real time, which could lead to more powerful and impactful insights. AI systems also learn from data and improve over time without human intervention, adapting to new patterns and new trends. You can now go beyond the low-hanging fruit of simple rules and uncover those complex and actionable insights about your space that are truly going to move the needle. And you could do this at scale and without more resources. To summarize this section, we could look at the evolution of data utilization. Initially, we had no data visibility, which we could call the blindside era. I doubt any of you on the call are in that space. The advent of BI tools and frameworks allowed us to look back and understand what happened, generally in a siloed, limited way. This is the hindsight phase. Today, AI enables us to predict, to prevent, and to optimize using huge volumes of unified holistic data, moving us into the foresight era. In this fourth section, now I want to look more concretely and outline some examples of how AI can practically help you and your organization in real-life situations and scenarios. As we've seen, AI could help efficiently aggregate, transform, and structure all the existing sources in your organization: inventory data, POS transactions, video analytics, data about your workforce and human resources, all the PDF and AutoCAD floor plans and layouts of your buildings, local crime levels, and hundreds of other data sources to automatically generate insights that I would divide into two main conceptual categories: strategic insights on the one hand, and operational insights on the other. And I'd like to just give an overview of these two different types and categories of insights. On the strategic side, on the left-hand side of this screen, you could leverage the data to understand your space and identify potential optimization opportunities across your entire footprint of hundreds or even thousands of locations. Think of it as having a leading consultant like McKinsey or Accenture working continuously for you 24/7, crunching all your tens of millions of different data points to see how you could strategically combat shrink and improve your business's operations. For example, at which specific points within your distribution center flow are you experiencing loss of a specific product category? And what are the root causes? How do you address them? And if you address them, how much money would your business save? Or if you're thinking about employing video analytics around your self-checkout process, can we predict what the shrink reduction will be? Will it vary based on store location, store type, or item category? Is the investment worth it in some cases? Should you deploy it in some locations and not others? Advanced AI analytics could provide these types of strategic insights. These are the big questions for executives and leaders in a business to take impactful decisions. And then on the other side, on the operational side, we could think of more tactical insights. Do you have a risk or an anomalous behavior at the individual store level that you would want to know about in real time? Now I'd like to look at some examples. So we could look at some examples here of insights that could be generated on a daily basis, hourly basis, even a minute-by-minute basis, with no manual analysis and no manual reporting required. The complex information of all of your aggregate data could be crunched, distilled, and presented to you with all the relevant information. So in this example, around self-checkout question processes optimization, we see that a pilot program was run across 31 stores where tailored questions were presented in the self-checkout process based on item categories. And those tailored questions reduced shrink of luxury high-end perfumes by 18%, which is a substantial shrink category for this organization. The increase in checkout time was marginal. So this insight comes with a specific recommendation to employ this process only in specific stores carrying these specific perfumes for an estimated annual savings of $1.4 million. On this slide, we have an insight related to deliveries. That receiving deliveries of more than 3 pallets in urban city locations during a certain time of day of the week, which could be a peak time, is correlated with a 12% increase in shrink and a recommendation to change the delivery schedule in these locations for a projected saving of $182,000 a year. Now, with any insight, you might think it's not relevant, or maybe it's very valuable and very actionable. But the important thing to understand is that you provide feedback to the system, and a deep learning model learns and evolves from your input. It's consistently getting more powerful, more accurate, and more able and capable to provide you and your business value. From the operational point of view, I'm going to present a few different examples. Over here on the screen, we could see on the left-hand side a heat map or visualization of where shrink might occur in a retail environment or a warehouse distribution center environment. That would mean taking your inventory data, your shrink data, the layout of your store or distribution center, reflecting all of the aisles and bays and locations, the layout and position of all your security assets, such as cameras, and automatically mapping these elements together and visualizing and heat mapping shrink in the context of physical space and your security controls. Think about what we said earlier about AI helping knock down data silos. This is a good example of automating a process combining structured data sets of shrink and inventory with unstructured 2D floor plans that simply would not be feasible at scale with manual processes. And it's unbelievable what insights on-site teams can derive from having this type of visualization at their fingertips. From the operational side of view, we could also look at real-time notifications. And here are 2 examples. You have a camera covering high-value electronics that has gone down in one of your stores in a certain location. There's a suggestion to intervene and a prediction of the weekly losses if you don't. Now, again, think of the data sources, camera systems, of course, but also your inventory layout. For the system and platform and AI to know what that camera is seeing, what is it observing, and what is it protecting? And historical data of shrink around these specific item types being observed by the camera in the specific store. To generate something very precise and targeted for you to action, rather than generating the noise of flagging each camera that has gone offline, and which you might not have a pressing reason to prioritize. Or in the insight below, a pattern of an employee who voids transactions and then enters the back of the store area shortly thereafter. Again, this is not just looking at the POS data in isolation, but taking other data points to catch an anomaly that would likely be missed by a rules-based siloed approach. I think now is a good time to jump to the second poll. So if you don't mind pulling that up, Stephanie. So the second poll is, which specific aspect of shrink do you aim to reduce? Process and supply chain, insider threat, customer theft, organized crime, or other. So when you're thinking of the main initiatives in your organization this year, which aspect of shrink is your highest priority to combat?
Okay, it looks like we have a good amount of people who have responded.
That's really interesting. That process and supply chain is the number one ranking issue, which I actually think is great, because I think it's too easy, to attribute theft or shrink, for example, to self-checkout processes, when in reality, when you look at the entire supply chain and all the processes of moving goods through a complex retail environment, that process and supply chain probably is the most likely contributor, single largest contributor to shrink. And we see in the data that insider threat is second, followed by customer theft and organized crime, also at 17%. So that's really a fascinating response. So thank you, everyone, for sharing your insight on that. I think to summarize, when we look at how an AI data analytics and insight system could compare to traditional BI or rule-based approaches, AI offers a unified, proactive, powerful, and adaptable approach compared to the limited, non-scalable, and reactive nature of the traditional frameworks. The ability to integrate diverse data sources and provide real-time insights and continuously learn and adapt makes AI data platforms the most suitable technological solution for the complex and multifaceted challenge of shrink and asset protection that everyone on this webinar is charged with dealing with. AI presents a major opportunity for asset protection leaders to think beyond how things have always been done in the past. It is a chance for you to think of creative approaches to add value to your business and leverage technology to empower you, your careers, your teams, and your organizations. Think about what you would do if you had unified access to all of your business's data. Think about all the cases in your work where you'd want to find a pattern, an insight, or a prediction out of the vast amounts of data that exist in your business. And think about just how powerful this approach could be. And the one thing that I emphatically recommend is to try it. Try it and see for yourself what the benefits are. You will be astounded. It is truly an exciting time in the asset protection space. And I hope what I've presented in this webinar has provided at least some valuable insights into how AI could help you and your teams combat shrink in retail. And if you want to learn more, want to discuss specific use cases, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And my colleague now will share my contact details on the Zoom chat. And with that said, I'd like to open up the floor to any questions any of you in the audience might have. So I'm going to start with one question here, which I'm going to read, is how could I effectively convince internal stakeholders of the importance of leveraging AI in our organization? So I think this is an interesting question. So I often hear in the space that a team has an initiative, but the executive team, the other stakeholders just won't give the budget. And it's a source of frustration. And I think in those cases, the reason why a budget is not allocated is because there's simply not enough data to justify the business case. Because executives and leaders in any business will always approve spend or budget if the ROI is clear. So what I suggest in these cases, if you're wanting to convince internal stakeholders of an AI initiative that you want to undertake, is you have to build the data and have to build the business case. And the best way of doing that is through a pilot. And I've a few views or suggestions on how to approach that pilot. First, take a problem in your organization, a real business challenge around asset protection use case. Take that limited problem, do something small in a very specific area, but aim to do it really, really well. Do something small, but do it really well. I think second, time-bound the pilot. Your vendor, whoever you choose, has to be able to show that value quickly with a minimal amount of effort on your part. You should not be spending weeks and weeks of effort pulling data for your vendor to show value. It should be something that within hours or days of work on your side, an AI platform is able to show the return. And third point that I'd mention is that I think the pilot should be done for free. I don't think a vendor should charge for a pilot because the vendor should be confident that the ROI and business impact is so clear during the pilot that an organization will surely want to continue. And if you don't see that confidence, then I don't know if it's worth your time because you don't want to be working with vendors who are experimenting or trying things that may or may not work. And I think if you pull all those pieces together and have a pilot that runs and solves a very specific case and is addressing a real challenge around asset protection in your business and shows a really clear and concrete financial ROI, bottom line impact, right? Because that's what all of us are after is bottom line impact. No one should do something because it's the latest or it's the newest or there's a technological craze. We should only do things that deliver clear financial value and impact to the organization. Once you have that in place, I think convincing internal stakeholders becomes something really seamless and easy to do, but you can't do it without the data. I'm going to pull another question, which is, does this platform require an existing LP analytics program, or would this be in place of this? So I think that's an interesting question. I'm even going to broaden it. What are the prerequisites to start implementing a AI data analytics and insight platform? First, I think there has to be a culture of constant improvement within the organization, right? If the approach is that shrink is eating away at the business's bottom line and gross margins, but everything's great and everything's under control and we have full visibility of our data, that's not a likely candidate for a successful AI initiative, right? People could be great at their job and they could be delivering a lot of value for their business, but still have the understanding that there's so many areas where improvement could be made. Second, and as it relates to having an existing loss prevention, asset protection, analytics program in place, yes, I think it's absolutely essential because there has to be at least the foundations and culture, both from a cultural and technological point of view around data in the organization. If there's no data analytics whatsoever in the organization, it's probably premature for your organization to make the leap into the world of AI. We really view this as a crawl, walk, run type of scenario. If you have an existing BI type platform, analytics platform in place, that's the foundation for that team to start elevating the type of analytics, the volume of analytics, the scope of analytics that they're able to provide by leveraging this technology. So I would say that that is a prerequisite. The question of what is the expected return on investment when implementing AI for asset protection? I think that anyone should be looking for a very significant return. I think you should be expecting a 4 to 6x return on your investment, not in a matter of years, but in a matter of months. Why? Because the opportunity is so great, because there's so much data that remains largely untapped, that once you unify this data and you start to analyze it at scale and start to generate insights at scale, both strategic and operational insights, the return is going to be very significant. And if you're not seeing that type of significant return, then there's likely a problem with the type of platform that you're using or the approach to the initiative. A related question: how long does it typically take to integrate AI into an existing asset protection strategy? As I said, as it relates to a pilot, you should be able to deploy something that's giving value to your organization in a matter of weeks, right? If a vendor is telling you, it's just around the corner, but we need another month, another quarter, another year to show value, then something's seriously wrong. Value should be delivered in a matter of weeks. And then that value could grow over time. Right? It could be an incremental and continuously evolving process where you're going to provide to the AI analytics data platform certain types of data, certain locations, understand what the value is, document that value and validate it in terms of concrete financial ROI, and then continuously work to integrate more data. And now your return is going to increase over time. The system will also start to learn about your environment and the feedback that you give it. So the value could be exponentially growing over time, but you have to see, or you should expect to see, value right out of the gate in the initial weeks after deployment. Another question that I see is what are the primary risks and threats associated with leveraging AI for asset protection? I think this is an interesting question, and I'm going to interpret it, the question through the lens of data security. Is there a data security or confidentiality risk associated with leveraging AI for your asset protection data? I think it's interesting that this is a common concern within the space of asset protection or even physical security, and much less of a concern in the world of cyber, where it is their primary responsibility to ensure data protection and safeguarding of digital assets, where in the cyberspaces we've discussed, AI models, solutions, SaaS platforms are standard and used across the board, right? As we said, an average enterprise is using 32 different cyber software solutions. So if we think about it through the lens of data security, data privacy, data security, if that's how we take the question, arguably, I don't think AI itself as a tool of analytics really carries any risk, because the risk is where the data sits, the data itself. That data exists already within an organization. And arguably, if that data is spread through many different legacy repositories and different silos, if it's transmitted over email through different Excel sheets or smart sheets, arguably the threat of a data breach is much larger than if the data is in a modern data lake secured by the latest industry standards. With that being said, of course, any vendor, whether they're using AI or not, you should be looking at the latest industry certifications such as ISO and SOC certification and the procurement and contracting process. It should be clear with an AI vendor that your data, the data from your environment, cannot be commingled, cannot be used to train models or mixed with other customers' data. You own your data. And I think that's something that any customer should insist on with any AI vendor or platform, that their data is their data, they own it, and it could be not used outside of their isolated and specific environment. And I think just to conclude, and apologies for going on about this question, is you could think about an abstract risk or threat around data, right? Which of course exists and shouldn't be minimized. But think about the much more real and concrete threat of shrink that's occurring every single minute, every single hour, every single day. As we said, just in this 1 hour of this call, retailers are going to lose $16 million due to shrink. That threat is real. It's a concrete threat, and AI could really help combat it. I'm just going to see what other questions that we have over here. What level of technical expertise is required to deploy and effectively use AI for asset protection? I think we touched on this already. I think that there needs to be a culture and competency around data to begin with, whether that's in the form of BI and data analysis. That has to exist in the organization as the foundation for a more sophisticated AI initiative. There's one attendee who said very excited about the possibilities. Could you share any success stories on the use case of the platform? I think we could wrap up. If you'd like to download an executive summary of the platform, you could reach it with this QR code. And if you'd like specific success stories, feel free to reach out to me, and we'd be glad to jump on a call and go into more detail. I think unless there's any other questions, I'd really like to thank everyone for your time. Really appreciate it, and I hope everyone got at least something out of this webinar.
Thank you. That was great, Stefan. I know I got a lot out of it. And just to let everyone know that if you want your coworkers to listen into this too, this will be available on demand. They just need to register for it. So we'll get that available. And if you have questions, please use the email for Stefan in the chat. And I'm sure that he'll get right back to you with whatever your question is. So thank you again, everyone. And I hope you enjoyed the webinar, and we'll see you down the road soon in another one. Thank you again.